The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library.
Hey, I'm talking with my brother, Chris Doran, in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Chris has traveled all over. He's been involved in protests, so many different cities. He's lived in Australia, Japan. What we're talking about today is one particular protest. And Chris, you can mention others. I know you're in Seattle, Miami. But the one we're talking about, because of the Capitol riots last week, has a very unique story. Chris was one of, I think, 5 protesters in the Senate in the gallery in April 2003, war and taxes for war. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Chris to tell that story. I think it's a really interesting and a pertinent story to what we're experiencing today. Chris?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not anywhere near as, it was very nonviolent and nothing compared to what we witnessed last week in the Capitol. But this was 2003. For those of us who were around then or old enough to be cognizant of the politics, that was when the Bush administration decided to invade Iraq. There were a number of contentious votes, but the vote that we were dealing with was the appropriations vote in the Senate. And the Senate, like now, was very partisan and divided. And Dick Cheney, Vice President Dick Cheney, was also, I just want to mention, he's also a war criminal, as many people in the Bush administration are. But anyway, Dick Cheney was the deciding vote. And so it was early April 2003. And at that time, you just, you had to get a pass to go in the Senate gallery, but there was a viewing gallery that the public is allowed to go into. It's a lot of school groups and, civic groups, et cetera, but anyone from the public can apply to get a pass and go into the viewing gallery. And so we did, and it took quite a while. They didn't start voting until I think 7 o'clock in the evening. And then myself and 4 other activists, we had it worked out. We stood up and said, "Senators, our taxes are not for bombing nations, nor foreign invasions, nor corporate occupations. No money for war, no money for war."
So you chanted this. What happened then, Chris?
Well, much to our surprise, again, it was 7 o'clock in the evening. There weren't really many, as I recall, very few other people in the gallery. Having been involved in other protests, we expected to be, dealt with very quickly and harshly. I think what happened was they just, first of all, there were alarms that were going off, like, air raid sirens, loud sirens, flashing lights. We could see troops or, men, primarily men, in combat gear running down the halls of, the Capitol. And we thought, oh my God, is this for us? And so I think that they just thought that something much worse had happened and couldn't really understand that it was just a few people mainly kids who were standing up in the viewing gallery and chanting. But we did have the full attention of the Senate. I think it was, if not entertaining, it certainly interrupted them. They weren't able to vote that day. It got postponed to the next day where Cheney was the deciding vote. So, Hillary Clinton was there, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, McConnell, Dick Cheney, I guess the famous Senate crew, as it were.
So, how long were you in there before somebody came and got you?
Remember, but we were surprised that it didn't happen sooner. There was a guy in a suit. He didn't seem to be a police officer per se. I can't remember if he was even armed. But he, approached us and basically was practically begging us to stop as if his job was in jeopardy or he would get in trouble. Of course, at this point, we'd been chanting for a while. We kept chanting as, then police officers did come, arrested us, handcuffed us, let us out of the viewing gallery down. It's quite, it's a very, very large building, very ornate. And so we went quite a distance before, it's being taken down a series of stairs and then out to, to be processed and incarcerated.
So they handcuffed you in the gallery?
Yeah, but we kept chanting, and again, we were able to postpone it for a while. And when I remember John McCain followed us out and was very interested in I would say he's more interested in the spectacle of us being arrested than he was in the anything to do with our message. Obviously, John McCain did vote for the appropriations for war and did vote for the Iraq war and supported it.
When you were arrested, what happened? I mean, where'd they take you?
I believe it was the Capitol Police. We went to, I can't remember where we were arrested. I remember being then transferred to real handcuffed as you often are to I think it's like a pipe or a chair. Then we're being interrogated. They wanted to know where we got the passes from, as if they were, contraband or something. And we said we just applied for them like anyone from the public can. And I think the police were upset that they'd been, kind of humiliated. But we spent the night in jail, and I think we were released on bail the following morning.
So you were in jail in DC for a night?
Yeah. Yep.
How did they treat you? I mean, obviously they arrested you and handcuffed you, but beyond that,
they treated every time I've been arrested and again, this is for a nonviolent protest, sharp contrast to what we witnessed last week. They treated us similar to every other time I've been arrested, threatened to be put in with the, general population, telling us that essentially the males and females would be, raped, and we'd be put in with, common criminals, that they couldn't wait to see how we'd handle that. So we're treated, the arrest process itself, I have been tackled before and pepper sprayed and drugged by my hair, so the arrest itself was not as violent as other instances I've had, but I would say the contempt that the police showed for us expressing what in this country is the First Amendment right to free speech and freedom to express our views, etc. We certainly were aware that we were breaking the law by interrupting Congress, but again, all we did was stand up and chant. Very different from breaking into the Capitol and endangering lives and all the horrible things we witnessed last week. And of course, by the way, I think most people would agree that we were right. It was a huge contentious issue in 2003, the Iraq War, the approval of it. There were no weapons of mass destruction. I think most Americans would view the Iraq War as a horrible mistake, and that was one of many, many protests against that war, and I just wish we could have been more successful.
saying just today, or not, I mean, currently, there's a $740 billion budget for the Pentagon. I think since your protest in 2003, approximately $6 trillion spent by the United States of America on killing people in other countries, which has a profound negative effect on our own people, homelessness, poverty, despair, money that should be spent for national health care, for decent wage, free college, goes to war. And there's never a question in Congress about, oh, what about the deficit? Oh, how are we going to pay for this? That's what you'll get when you say you want national health care, or you want to pay all these people suffering from the pandemic. You get $600 where the Pentagon's getting 740 billion. I read where if they cut that by 85%, America would still have the largest military budget in the world. So what you did is terribly important, even though it still goes on, because eventually this has got to at least put a dent in it, or I think we're finished as a race. I don't. Plus the effect on the environment, the negative effect on the environment, and you'd pointed out what a big difference last week in the Capitol, where people, mostly guys with guns, big guns, just waltzed in there and plotted to assassinate people. And I've read where the police removed barriers to let them in.
Yeah, and there's video evidence of that. I think that, and obviously you have a broader perspective on this, but that has always felt like the real America to me. And I think that's why they were let in, because essentially they, however you want to frame it, but the powers that be, the Capitol Police, etc., didn't see them as a threat. That's why the security was low. And they were loath to take any real action against them because, again, they perceived white Christian right-wing protesters as, let's just say, more American than Black Lives Matter protesters or protesters against war, protesters trying to address poverty, climate change, etc. And the great irony is that, what clearly, I think there was a lot of organization and leadership, and we're seeing that come out with the investigations, but overall there's just a bunch of buffoons. They look like buffoons, they acted like buffoons, they look completely perplexed when they were in there. Again, there were people who were going door to door searching for Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence, etc., who are, as we understand it, seeking to take their lives or kidnap them, etc. And I'm just astounded that, again, in my experience, in nonviolent protest, the way they were treated was just light years different than the way I've been treated. My fellow activists have been treated. When I was involved in mass protests, we always had to have a system. We had to have a protection for people of color, because we knew the police would go after them first. And it just is not surprising to me that, again, given how police react to people who are clearly unarmed, who are peacefully protesting, the violence that they're met with, that we saw all last summer, almost as if a proud display of police brutality in response to protests against police brutality. And I'm, as many people are, concerned for the future of our country. But I think that, this is, there's a lot of irony that many of us who have felt America's, let's just say, problematic for the reasons you went through before, now we're kind of like almost forced to choose the side of a regular, fucked up America, which we don't, really respect or wish for, versus fascism and civil war. But I think that that is the choice we're faced with, and I hope that it doesn't come down to that. But I would say clearly, judging by the military presence at the Capitol right now, and judging by what we saw last week, this is, civil war, and I don't think that they're going to stop. And it's just, it's just so sad to see that we can't have any kind of actual policy discussion or reality-based discussion. Instead, we have people clearly influenced by religion and right-wing manipulation to, want to do this. And
On both sides.
on both sides. How do you see it on both sides, Paul?
Well, the people claim that they have the same problem with both parties, with some of their right-winged members. So although this time it appeared to be mostly with the Republicans, because most of these people were attending a lot of Trump's rallies, but it has worked from the other side in the past also.
How do you see it working? I don't see the other side having tried to start a civil war, the massive.
I did this time around, but in past years, we've had people from the other side.
Okay, well, you need to cite the example.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
I can't really call off any, but I thought that some of them back in the 60s was Democratic.
I
don't believe they were all being run from, because I think that most of those people that were there are not really a party people. They just followed Trump because they liked what he was saying. And so they were attending a lot of his meetings.
Sure, Paul, but Donald Trump is the president of the United States and is the lead person in the Republican Party. So I don't think you can separate it out. Also, you have people like QAnon followers being elected. You have over 100 people in the House objecting to the election results, wanting them to be readdressed. You have proportion in the Senate. So I think, yes, indeed, you can say this is the Republican Party. You disagree with that, but
no, I'm not saying this time I agree with that. I do agree with that. I'm just saying in the past, it hasn't always been, from the Republican side. Sometimes it's been from the Democratic side. So
it just depends. I don't think we've seen anything like this from the Democratic side, but anyway.
No, I've not seen no attacks on the White House like they did this time. But we have had, we've had protesters that got mixed in with some of these groups, and they started tearing up places over the years, and this has happened off and on. Terry, wanted you to kind of tell a little bit about your experience at that time here in the city of Fort Wayne against the police and all that.
Well, it was, unfortunate. The police, I wasn't directly involved. I was an organizer. I live in Bloomington, and I was just visiting. I went to a few of the marches, but the footage was overwhelming. The police reaction to and things I've seen personally experienced in the past, or the police kind of like herd people into an area and then tear gas them, pepper spray. There was a young man who lost his eye through being shot with a rubber bullet, I believe a rubber bullet. And the police reaction was just, astounding. And, the majority, and, you certainly is an argument that the police were, this would be the argument, police were defending themselves or were out, I don't know, whatever. But, you had people who were, the elderly people. You had people just in cars with their windows rolled down. The police pepper sprayed and tear gassed them. You had people seriously injured, and again, nonviolent protest. And so, it's, to me, it's not even to me. I think the evidence is overwhelming that the police response in this country, if you compare the preparation alone for the protest last week versus the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, D.C., similarly in Fort Wayne, the police response to Black Lives Matter protests. And again, this is, I think that the Black Lives Matter protests, I speak personally, have a legitimate concern. We've seen countless young Black men and women, I guess not necessarily all young, who have been just literally shot, unarmed, shot, and seemingly with no justification. There's research that's just come out, studies showing that unarmed Black people are 3 times more likely to be shot by police than armed white people. So, an armed white person committing a crime is less likely to be shot than an unarmed Black person being pulled over for who knows what reason. And this is documented. It's a video documentation. I think that's the big difference now, is that the social media is so much easier to communicate this. We're not relying exclusively on the media, to tell the story. But anyway, so the Fort Wayne protests were great because there are many brave, fantastic, beautiful activists who were standing up and going out night after night and documenting and protesting and trying to make Fort Wayne, as well as the rest of the country, a better place. And unfortunately, as was evidenced throughout the country, the police reaction was what's called police brutality for a reason.
Yes, and again, that was a peaceful protest. I don't believe any protester was armed. The only people armed were the Fort Wayne police, and witnesses that I know personally said the police instigated a lot of it. But I wasn't there. Chris did, I want to point out, wrote a powerful op-ed in our morning paper, the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, and expressing his views. And that's what we're here talking about, is our First Amendment rights. And a lot of people have said those riots were sort of a means to an end to instill even worse laws to take away those rights from us, peaceful protesters. And again, as Chris has pointed out, in that Capitol riot situation, they were not protesting against anything meaningful, in my opinion, like get rid of student loan, get rid of these endless wars, at least reduce the Pentagon budget, the terrible negative effect on the environment, the laws, fracking, hunting in national parks, etc., etc., etc. They were out for raw power and the status of feeling important. I think one thing that's interesting, Chris and Paul, if you look at the symbol, the strongest symbol, the American flag, when people protest and kneel during the national anthem, and usually there's a big flag somewhere, they are, considered anti-American. But you look at the protests last week, they were all carrying, not all, but there are a lot of American flags in one hand and a big machine gun in another hand, and the person next to him had a Confederate flag and Nazi flags. And what was that war all about?
Auch eine andere Macht, die sehr gewaltig war in Deutschland, hat unterdessen die Erfahrung erleben können, dass die nationalsozialistischen Prophezeiungen keine Phrasen sind. Es ist die Hauptmacht, der wir all dieses Unglück verdanken, das internationale Judentum. Sie werden sich nur erinnern an die Reichstagssitzung, in der ich erklärte, wenn das Judentum sich etwa einbildet, einen internationalen Weltkrieg zur Ausrottung der europäischen Rassen herbeiführen zu können, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Ausrottung der europäischen Rassen, sondern die Ausrottung des Judentums in Europa sein.
So anyway, very good point.
Well,
You were also, Chris, you were in Miami and New York, and you were in Seattle, and you were arrested at least in some of those cities. And again, just to reinforce your point, peaceful protests treated harshly by American police. And we should point out when you were talking about black males being 3 times more likely to be shot by police. Last year in 2020, in the
Killed.
United States of America, over 1,000 innocent, in the sense of convicted of no crime, murdered by American police. I say murdered, but killed. And generally, there's no trial or accountability.
Yeah.
And America also has the largest prison population in the world.
Yes, we excel at a number of metrics which are not enviable.
Pardon?
I say we excel at having a number of metrics that are not very
Yeah,
should not be envied.
not something to be proud of, but you know, it's like a reverse. I mean, a lot of people are proud of stuff like that. That empowers them, I guess. That seemed to be the case with the people in the Capitol. And I'm not a big fan of Congress, but I definitely oppose anybody saying they're going to assassinate, whether they're political leaders or a member of the public. I definitely opposed to violence in that.
Yeah. I think the really frightening thing is that however you want to define it, and I don't think you define it as far right. I don't think they're far at all. Not when you have approximately half of Republicans agreeing with what happened at the Capitol. You have a majority of Republicans still supporting, Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not just talking about an isolated incident. We're talking about an incident supported by a vast swath of the country, including one of the 2 major political parties, or at least a large segment of it. So the issue is that the inability to have a public discourse, to have a public recognition of facts, and a public recognition that regardless of what we think about, democracy and the outcome, et cetera, clearly Joe Biden won the election. And then when you just have, and it's an interesting question for the future, what do you do when a president just, has a large following, 40% of the country, consistently, and just refuses to acknowledge that and claims that it was stolen, and even while the violence is going on, is egging them on, telling them that he loves them. So, this is, yes, Trump should be held accountable, and it should be, he should not be allowed to, he should be in prison, frankly, but we'll see if that happens. But the real issue is what to do as a country about, the other side, quote unquote. And I don't think the other side is going to back down. I think that we are headed for a reckoning. And I think that, what is going to have to happen is people are going to have to take a side. And it's not like the Civil War where there's a geographical boundary. You can go and wear either a blue or gray uniform, etc. Now it's much more diversified in terms of who is on whose side, and it's astounding to me that movements like QAnon and just the non-stop perpetual lies that Trump has told. And we often accuse each other of lying, etc. But these aren't subtleties anymore. These aren't nuanced political lies. These are just outright, lies. He's lied practically every day of the presidency, and so you can't really govern when you have and clearly, I think we're lucky that nothing worse happened under Trump. But the question is, how do we move on, and how can a febrile democracy like America, 2 parties, not that many people vote, one party wins all. We've only been a racial democracy for approximately 50 years. You know, how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to move forward? And I hope we're able to, but it's a very, very difficult question when you just can't have a discourse. You can't have a conversation based on, here's the facts, how do we address the facts?
Yeah, I agree. I've never been involved in those kind of protests. I've been to a number of Right for Life protests. Yeah, I've been involved with some of the protests that they've had out south of town there along the highways and stuff, where they stand along the curving and wave at people and hold their signs.
Uh-huh.
I haven't been involved in any marching protests or group protests. Any other, of course, being that I'm tied in with Access TV, and I do a lot of camera work. I filmed some protesting people downtown in front of the courthouse. I've done a little bit of that, and usually I went down with someone else who wanted to do the questioning. They just wanted someone to, handle the camera work. So
well, Paul does a lot, and for example, I did a show a few years back called The Legacy of Anthony Wayne. Just to be clear, I am not an Anthony Wayne fan. I am not a fan of people who engage in genocide. And anyway, the point is, this was at Priman Square, and Paul brought.
Hey, wait a second.
System, and so he does a lot.
Harry,
what's your problem with genocide?
Yeah.
Sorry.
What's important is to stand up for what we believe in, and I think that's a jeopardy. Indiana, I have read, is working on a law to make protesting a crime, a felony, I believe. And one thing would be seizing property for protesting, like what we're talking about, not guns into a building, but just protesting. And what happened at the Capitol definitely has a precedent. I mean, they went into the Capitol building in Michigan, a month or two ago. I think another city just waltz in, and like here in Allen County, if you want to go in the courthouse, you got to go through a metal detector thing. And if you had a gun, they'd come and get you. Apparently they let these people in, like Chris said.
Well, Michigan passed a law basically saying that people could have open carry in the state house. So they've since declared, I think, whether it's the emergency or changed the law, but essentially they're not, thank goodness, not able to do that anymore. But yeah, this isn't again, it wasn't it wasn't an out of the blue event. It's an event based on large numbers of people supporting Trump and supporting Trump in a way, whether it's the Michigan State House or other instances, the number of Trump supporters elected to Congress, supporting him in Congress, et cetera. So there's all sorts of ways to measure it. And the question is what happens next? And the real, and I think the great irony is that one of the things that most Americans were drilled into is that we should be proud we're a democracy. Clearly, when I say these people, we're talking about a large number of people who will not accept the results of the election, an election which was relatively uncontentious. Joe Biden won by over 8 million votes, went through, lawsuits, court cases, recounts, so the real fear is if we're going to have a large number of people who absolutely refuse to accept democratic outcomes, and to be fair, the left has accepted, we accepted Donald Trump. Nobody stormed the Capitol when he got elected, but in retrospect, perhaps we should have. So, the real question is what happens next, and how can we be prepared for what happens next? Because this isn't just about the United States. This is about the future of the planet, future of life as we know it. I don't think the planet could survive an American civil war. I don't know if the planet can survive the continuation of the United States relative to climate change and degradation of our biosphere, et cetera. But these are interesting questions we're faced with.
Well, anything you want to say in closing? I want to add that Chris is also the author of a terrific book called Making the World Safe for Capitalism, which goes into detail on some of the things we're talking about today. And he's also a very colorful, talented singer with his band Blind Uncle Harry. And
so I guess in closing is that, the key thing that I see is this militant rise of the Christian right and the ability of people on the right to, I guess, cloak themselves in the Bible and claim that what they're doing is, what the Bible wants, or what their God, their Jesus, the central figure in their religion, Jesus wants, etc. And, we've always been a nation which is much more religious than any other first world country. And I say that having lived partially in Europe, have Australian citizenship, lived in Japan, etc. Religion does not enter the politics in those countries anywhere near like it does here. It's just not an issue. And so, how, we're talking about really conservative right-wing views, very dangerous views on, essentially whether women should be subordinate to men, all sorts of, essentially that Christianity should be the governing ethos, if not become a theocracy, that the United States should become a theocracy. So that gets talked about a little bit, but again, it seems as if we're always afraid to offend anyone, and obviously there are Christians on the left and the right, but you saw a number of Bibles, Christian flags, you saw people praying, we've heard this non-stop stupid fucking rhetoric about Jesus Christ or Christian God chose Trump as the new Christ, I don't know, whatever. And it's just extremely, first of all, it's just so stupid. And second of all, it's so dangerous, and it's unbelievable that anyone could think that Donald Trump was picked by any kind of all-powerful being. But that's where we are. And I think that's the really scary thing, is that compared to the first Civil War, at least you could go, hey, the economy is based on slavery, and hey, these they're property, and hey, really, we treat Black people well. I mean, at least there was a fact of slavery that could be debated and argued. We don't have the ability to pick a central issue and agree on its existence and then disagree on how to address it. And that is a truly frightening thing. So everyone, Paul, Terry, everyone has done their part to make the world a better place. We had a lot of work cut out for us.
well,
sorry, gotta laugh.
Well, that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. All right, thank you both.
My state has a first name is R-A-C-I-S-T. My state has a second name is Jesus Freaks. Indiana, Indiana. William Henry Harrison, if there's a hell, I hope he burns. He murdered lots of Indians, that asshole William Henry Harrison. First Hoosier American, I'm so proud. By theft or murder we stole the land from the Miami Indians, but we had to clear the land and make it safe for the Ku Klux Klan. Indiana, that's what I call some genuine Hoosier progress. Just take a look around. We were the king of sundown towns. Dark, you best be out of town.